From the very first day she stepped into the house, Reby knew exactly what image she wanted to project. Draped in a soft-colored dupatta, eyes lowered, and voice gentle, she walked like a breeze and spoke like silk. Her smile was modest, her gestures humble, and her tone respectful. Everyone praised her, especially the neighbors who said, "Mashallah, what a blessing. A daughter-in-law like this is a gift from above." And indeed, she seemed like one. She woke up early, helped Amy, her mother-in-law, in the kitchen, laid the table for breakfast, and always greeted her husband, Hamza, with a warm cup of chai when he returned from work. Her behavior was flawless. To any outsider, even to Hamza, she looked like the dream woman, responsible, respectful, and full of warmth. But what no one saw was what happened behind closed doors, when no one was watching. When Amy asked her politely if she could fold the laundry left on the couch, Reby smiled sweetly and said, "Of course, Sammy." But the moment she turned around, her eyes darkened. She mumbled under her breath, "As if I'm your maid." When Hamza wasn't home, her politeness vanished. Her responses became cold, mechanical. If Amy gave advice, even with the best of intentions, Reby would nod quietly, then later roll her eyes and slam a cabinet or two a little louder than needed. She never raised her voice. No, she was far too clever for that. She understood something very important, that a calm face and a quiet voice could hide far more than shouting ever could. In front of guests, she would sit beside Amy, hold her hand and say, "She treats me like her own daughter." Amy would tear up, thinking she really had gained a daughter, not just a daughter-in-law. But deep down, Amy began noticing the little things. Reby would take credit for meals she hadn't cooked. She'd pretend she cleaned the house after Amy spent the whole morning dusting. She started telling Hamza things like, "Amy gets tired easily. I've taken over most of the work now," even though Amy still did it all. At first, Hamza dismissed the odd tensions as normal between women of the house. He would kiss Reby's forehead and say, "You're doing great. Just give Amy some time. She's old-fashioned." And Reby would smile, knowing exactly what she was doing, planting the first seeds of distance. Amy, though, wasn't stupid. She was observant. She noticed how her son had started spending less time talking to her, how even small complaints, like a broken jar or a burnt roti, suddenly became Amy's carelessness in Reby's words. Still, Amy stayed silent. She didn't want to disturb her son's happiness. She didn't want to become the typical controlling mother-in-law people often talked about. So she swallowed her words, again and again. But inside, the hurt began to pile up. One evening, after Reby had left the room smiling and giggling with Hamza, Amy sat in the kitchen alone. Her hands were shaking as she stirred her tea. She looked around the house she had kept for decades, the one she had raised her children in, and it suddenly felt unfamiliar. The warmth was fading, not because of change, but because of pretense. Reby's act was working. The household still saw her as perfect. Hamza still adored her. Guests still complimented her. But Amy, the woman who silently bore the weight of every manipulation, was growing smaller in her own home. And Reby? She knew exactly what she was doing. Her sweet smile was her sharpest weapon. At first, it was subtle, so subtle that even Hamza didn't realize he was being pulled away. Reby didn't accuse.
She didn't complain.
She simply planted thoughts, gently like seeds. It began one ordinary evening. The dinner was late by 10 minutes, and Hamza, exhausted from work, sighed as he sat at the table. The food was still warm, but he looked slightly annoyed. Reby smiled and served him. "Sorry, John," she said softly. "Amy insisted on making the curry herself today. I didn't want to disrespect her, you know?" Hamza blinked. "It's okay," he said. But the sentence stayed with him. Not because of the delay, but because of the way she said it. Like she had no choice. Like his mother was making the decisions. Like she, the sweet, obedient wife, was only trying her best. The next day, when the laundry wasn't folded properly, she didn't say a word. She just chuckled while handing him a shirt with creases. I was going to iron it, she said. But Amy said she already did it. I didn't want to upset her. Again, a small inconvenience. Again, a quiet, loving tone. And again, a tiny needle poked into Hamza's heart, not enough to wound, just enough to sting. Reby was never aggressive. She never said, "Your mother is doing everything wrong." She simply implied it. And slowly, ever so gently, Hamza began noticing things he had never noticed before. His mother leaving the dishes in the sink longer than usual. His mother forgetting the salt in a dish. His mother sitting too long on the sofa while Reby cleaned. Small things. Human things. Forgivable things. But now tinted by doubt. And every time something went wrong, Reby was there, with a soft sigh, a little shrug, and a line like, "Maybe she's just tired these days. I'll try to help more. I think she's upset with me. I don't know why. You know I respect her so much. I just wish she saw that." It confused Hamza. He loved his mother. She had raised him with love, built this home with her bare hands. But now, every time he looked at her, something felt different. Not wrong, just off. He began responding to Amy more bluntly. He started second-guessing her choices. He began believing, without realizing, that maybe Reby was suffering quietly and respectfully. Because she never made a scene. She just whispered. Softly. Sweetly. Poisonously. One night, they were lying in bed. The lights were off. Hamza had his arm around her, and she rested her head on his chest, her voice barely above a whisper. "You know," she said, "I don't mind sacrificing. But sometimes I feel like no matter what I do, she'll never think I'm good enough." Hamza tightened his grip on her shoulder. "That's not true," he said. She smiled sadly. "It's okay, Hamza. Maybe I just remind her that you're not a little boy anymore. Maybe that hurts her. I get it." In that moment, something inside Hamza shifted. Not anger, but guilt. Guilt that he hadn't protected Reby more. Guilt that maybe, without knowing it, his mother was being harsh. Guilt that the woman sleeping in his arms was hurting silently, and he wasn't doing enough. From then on, things changed. Hamza no longer noticed the tired lines on his mother's face. He didn't hear the hesitation in her voice when she asked for help. He didn't see the pain in her eyes when she was left alone at dinner while he and Reby laughed in their room. Reby had succeeded. Not with accusations. Not with shouting or fighting. Just with carefully crafted words, dipped in sweetness, delivered with innocence, and poisoned with intent. Amy, on the other hand, began feeling like a stranger in her own home. Her son, her pride, no longer shared his evenings with her. He didn't ask for her opinion. Sometimes he barely looked at her. She couldn't understand what she had done wrong. But Reby knew exactly what she had done right. The glass bowl shattered on the kitchen floor, a loud, sudden crash that silenced the entire house. Reby stood frozen for a moment, the wooden spoon still in her hand. She looked down at the mess, shards glinting under the tube light, turmeric-stained curry splattered on the white tiles, and then she glanced quickly at the kitchen doorway. No one had seen her. She took a slow breath, grabbed a cloth, and began cleaning, but not all of it. Just enough to make it look recent. A few moments later, Amy walked in, humming softly. She paused as soon as she saw the mess. "Reby, what happened?" Reby didn't look up right away. Her voice was low, filled with concern. "I'm not sure, Amy. I think it slipped from the shelf. You were in here earlier, right? Maybe it wasn't placed properly." There it was, the first shift. No accusation. Just a suggestion. A hint wrapped in softness, but sharpened underneath. Amy blinked, confused. I don't remember touching that shelf today." Reby smiled gently. "Oh, no worries. These things happen. Don't stress about it. I already cleaned most of it." She moved to the side, still wiping the floor. "I just hope Hamza doesn't get upset. You know how much he loved this bowl. He said it was a wedding gift from his Kala." A drop of sweat rolled down Amy's temple, but not from heat. From the sudden realization that her silence might cost her more than a bowl. And later that night it did. Hamza walked into the kitchen and paused. "Where's the bowl Kala gave us?" he asked casually. Reby hesitated, then turned, her eyes wide and soft. "Oh, didn't Amy tell you?" Hamza's brows lifted. "Tell me what?" "She accidentally knocked it over. It broke. I tried to save it, but she trailed off, then added quickly, 'It's okay though, really.' I told her not to feel bad about it." The arrow was subtle, but it struck hard. Hamza said nothing at first, just nodded and left the room. But from that day forward, something shifted again. The next incident came a few days later, the gas bill. It was unusually high, and Hamza brought it up during dinner. Reby raised her brows. "Oh, that's strange. I've been careful all month. I even turned off the geyser every day after use." She looked at Amy, then quickly looked away, as if embarrassed. Amy, caught off guard, opened her mouth. I may have forgotten once or twice, but Hamza cut her off. "You need to be more careful, Amy. The bills are getting out of hand." Amy lowered her gaze. The food in her mouth suddenly tasted like ash. It wasn't the bill. It was the feeling of being silently accused, of being treated like a burden in her own son's home. Then it was the misplaced medicine. Then the burned edge of the roti. Then the scratched Teflon pan. Each time, Reby's words were soft. Her tone was caring. Her intentions seemed innocent. But the blame always landed on Amy. And Amy, too shocked to argue and too tired to defend herself, began absorbing the blame like a sponge absorbs water. Each mistake Reby made became a weapon, and each time, she placed it neatly in Amy's hands as if to say, "Here, hold this guilt." Hamza, unaware of the web being spun around him, began to see patterns where there were none, all crafted by Reby's careful manipulation. "I think Amy's getting forgetful," he said one night. Reby rested her head on his shoulder. Maybe she's just stressed. I try not to bother her too much. Still, she needs to be a little more responsible." Reby didn't respond. She didn't have to. The silence spoke for her, full of fake concern and false patience. Amy began walking more quietly in the house. She double-checked the stove, the taps, the locked doors. She started noting down utility bill due dates in a small notebook. She had always been a strong woman, raised 3 children after her husband passed, managed the home, kept everything together. But now, in her own house, she felt like a guest. Worse, like a liability. She couldn't understand how her son, the boy who once clung to her hand, now looked at her with eyes of suspicion, or worse, disappointment. And Reby? She watched it all from the corner of her eye. The plan was working, slowly, precisely, and without a single raised voice. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to fight. She just needed to misplace the truth. Amy had always been a woman of dignity. Even in the hardest years of her life, when her husband died young, when she worked double shifts just to feed her children, when the world called her Bekhari, she never let her pain spill out. She had one rule: don't let your sorrow break someone else's heart. And now, she was living that rule again, painfully quietly. Because this time, the heart at stake was her son's. She saw the change in Hamza. She saw how he came home and headed straight to his room. How his tone toward her had softened, not in affection, but in distance. As if she were fragile, unreliable, or worse, untrustworthy. He didn't ask her advice like he used to. He didn't joke with her at dinner. He didn't sit beside her during late-night news shows. Instead, he sat beside Reby, who smiled sweetly, poured him tea, and slipped in quiet complaints like drops of vinegar into milk. Yet Amy said nothing. Not when her name was blamed for missing salt in the curry. Not when Reby let the laundry sit out in the rain and later said, "I thought Amy took it in." Not when Hamza started keeping the money with Reby instead of handing it to her like he always had. She wanted to scream, to tell Hamza everything, to look him in the eye and say, "Your wife is lying to you. She's turning you against me." But she couldn't, because her love for Hamza was bigger than her pain. And so she folded her silence into prayer. Every night, she whispered to God, Don't let him forget where he came from. Don't let him lose the truth. But even prayers can feel unanswered when the silence begins to feel like punishment. Hamza, on the other hand, was struggling with a storm he couldn't name. He didn't dislike his mother. How could he? She had built his world, raised him into a man, sacrificed everything. But lately, Areba's sadness had begun to weigh on him.
She didn't complain.
She never said anything cruel. She just looked tired, disappointed, quietly hurt. She tries so hard, he told himself. She respects Amy. She wants peace. But maybe Amy doesn't accept her. That idea haunted him. He didn't want to believe it, but the signs were there, or at least they seemed to be. And every time he thought of confronting his mother, he stopped himself. Because she didn't fight. She didn't even defend herself. She just looked at him with eyes that searched his soul and said nothing. And that silence? It scared him more than any argument could. One evening, Reby was in her room pretending to nap, while Hamza sat alone on the sofa. Amy came in quietly, holding a plate of fruit. "I cut these for you," she said softly. Hamza looked up, surprised. "You didn't have to, Amy." She smiled. A mother doesn't need a reason. She placed the plate on the table and turned to leave, but then paused. "Hamza," she said slowly, "do you think I'm becoming a burden in this house?" The words shook him. He looked up, confused. "What?" "No, Amy. Why would you say that?" She didn't answer directly, just gave a small smile, one that tried to hide decades of pain. Sometimes, when a house changes, the walls forget the voices that built it. He stared at her, unsure of what to say. He wanted to hug her, to promise her that she was still the soul of this home. But something held him back, a shadow of doubt, quiet and poisonous. And that's what Reby had wanted. Not to destroy his love for his mother, just to dilute it. Enough to create space. Enough to fill that space with herself. Later that night, Hamza sat on the bed beside Reby, his mind heavy. "Do you think Amy's happy here?" he asked. Reby opened her eyes, slowly. "Why?" "I don't know. She just seemed distant today." Reby turned her face toward him, her expression soft. "Maybe she's adjusting. Or maybe she's upset with me." "You? Why?" "I don't know," she whispered. "Sometimes I get the feeling that no matter what I do, I'll always be an outsider to her." Hamza reached for her hand. "That's not true." She smiled faintly. "It's okay, Hamza. I don't want to come between you and her. I really don't. Maybe I'm just imagining things." And just like that, the guilt returned and the confusion deepened. He kissed her forehead. And downstairs, Amy sat alone in the dark, the untouched fruit plate still beside her, and wondered how love so strong could begin to fade without a single heart. It started small. Reby began closing the bedroom door more often when she and Hamza were inside. The living room that once echoed with laughter and late-night family conversations now stood silent in the evenings. Amy would knock before entering their room, something she never used to do. And Reby always opened the door with a soft smile and said, "Oh, Amy, you should have told me you were coming. I would have made tea." But by then, the tea was already boiling, not on the stove, but in Amy's chest. She could feel it, the walls rising. Not between her and her son, but between her son and her. Every time she tried to spend time with him, Reby found a reason to interrupt. If Amy called him to help fix the leaky faucet, Reby would suddenly appear, saying, "Hamza, can you come check my laptop? It's not turning on." If Amy asked for a quick trip to the market, Reby would suggest a dinner date instead. "We haven't spent any time together in weeks," she'd pout. "Let's go out tonight." And Hamza, caught in the middle, would choose peace, and by peace he meant Reby. Amy watched quietly as her once deep bond with her son began to thin like threads stretched too far. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't distant by choice. But something had shifted. He wasn't hers the way he used to be. Reby knew exactly what she was doing. Every time Hamza chose her over his mother, she won a battle he didn't even know was being fought. And when she saw Amy sit alone in the drawing room, Staring at the TV that she wasn't really watching, Reby didn't feel guilty. She felt victorious. Because to her, this wasn't just about love. It was about control. She wanted to be Hamza's world. His first thought. His only loyalty. And for that to happen, the mother had to be moved quietly, gently out of the picture. But she wasn't finished yet. Breaking the bond wasn't enough. She had to blame the bond's weakness on Amy herself. One afternoon, as Hamza came home from work, he found Reby in the kitchen, unusually quiet. She didn't run to greet him like she usually did. "Everything okay?" he asked, setting his bag down. Reby turned slowly, her eyes misty. "I don't want to bother you, Hamza. You've had a long day." His brow furrowed. "Reby, what happened?" She hesitated, then said softly, "I think your mother doesn't like me being close to you. Maybe she feels I've taken her place." Hamza stared at her. "Did she say something?" No, she said quickly. She didn't need to.
It's in the way she looks at me.
The way she walks away when we laugh together. The way she sighs when you sit beside me." She took a breath and added, "I've tried so hard to respect her, but I feel like she's pulling away. And I don't know what I did wrong." The lie was precise, emotional. It made her look like the wounded one, and the mother like the cold, distant wall. And Hamza, wrapped in the comfort of his wife's arms and blind to the manipulation laced between her words, began to believe it. He began thinking that maybe his mother had changed. Maybe she was jealous. Maybe, after all these years, she couldn't share her son. He started seeing her quiet as withdrawal, not sacrifice. Her tired eyes as resentment, not heartbreak. Her distance as stubbornness, not survival. A few days later, at dinner, Amy reached for the salt shaker and accidentally knocked over a glass. It spilled across the table. Reby immediately stood and began cleaning. "It's okay, Amy," she said quickly. "It happens." Hamza didn't say anything, but the tightening of his jaw didn't go unnoticed. Later that night, when they were alone, he said, "She's been careless lately."
Distant too.
Reby looked at him, her eyes soft and sad. Maybe she feels replaced. And just like that, the seed she planted bloomed into a full-grown tree in Hamza's mind. He didn't ask his mother how she felt. He didn't sit beside her and talk like old times. He didn't even realize that the woman who raised him, who once stayed up all night when he had a fever, who sacrificed her meals so he could eat, now felt like a stranger in his heart. Amy watched him from a distance, watched him laugh with Reby, eat dinner at the table without her, make plans she was never included in. And when she went to her room at night, she didn't cry loudly. She cried the way mothers do, silently. So no one would feel burdened. So no one would blame themselves. But Reby? She was already blaming her, to the one person Amy had spent her life protecting. If words could wound without leaving scars, Reby had mastered the art. Her voice remained as soft as honey. Her smile never wavered. But buried beneath that gentle tone were sharp blades, sharpened with intent, polished with calculation.
And Amy?
She bled slowly, quietly, invisibly. It was a Friday morning when Reby, dressed neatly in a pastel shalwar kameez, walked into the living room where Amy was folding laundry. "Oh, Amy," she said sweetly, "you've done so much folding today. Don't worry, I'll redo the ones that are wrinkled." Amy paused. "Wrinkled?" Reby laughed. No, it's nothing. It happens, you know? Your hands have been working for decades. A little shakiness is natural." Her voice was playful, like a joke shared between women. But Amy didn't laugh. She simply looked down at the clothes in her lap and, for the first time, noticed the slight tremble in her own fingers. That same evening, as they prepared for dinner, a neighbor dropped by unexpectedly. Reby invited her in and poured tea, chatting with grace and charm. "You're lucky," the neighbor said. "Having such a wise mother-in-law must make things easier." Reby smiled. "Oh yes, she's very experienced. Though, sometimes she forgets small things like salt in the curry, but that's part of age, isn't it?" She laughed lightly, not even glancing at Amy, who stood nearby holding the very tray of samosas Reby was taking credit for. The neighbor chuckled, unaware. Mothers-in-law are a treasure. They are. Reby nodded. Even when they become a little difficult, we must love them. Amy said nothing.
She didn't need to.
Her silence was becoming her only language. What made Reby's cruelty more painful wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Always with sweetness. Always smiling. Always in ways that left no room for confrontation. And Hamza? He only ever saw her kindness. She always respects you, he told Amy one day. She's trying to win your heart. Amy looked at him, her heart swelling with the words she would never speak. How do you explain to your son that a knife wrapped in silk still cuts? The next week, Reby accidentally left Amy's medicine unpurchased. When Amy mentioned it, Reby gasped. Oh no. I was sure you said you already bought it. Or maybe I just misunderstood. These things slip past me when I'm tired. I'll get it first thing tomorrow, promise. Hamza, sitting nearby, said nothing, but looked at his mother with a frown. And Reby noticed. She filed it away. Another tiny wedge between mother and son. The worst was the morning of the family lunch. Hamza's cousins were visiting, and Amy wore her favorite teal shawl, the one her husband had gifted her years ago. As they prepared to leave, Reby stopped and tilted her head. That's such a classic shawl, Amy, she said with a gentle laugh. Vintage is in these days. Amy smiled faintly. It's old. Your father gave it to me. Reby leaned forward, touching the corner of the shawl. It's lovely, truly. Though, if you ever want help picking out something a little more modern, I'd love to help. There it was, the sting, dressed as affection, laced with poison. And later that evening, when Amy sat at the table quietly while Reby told story after story, stealing the spotlight, the compliments, the approval, no one noticed the woman slowly fading in the background. No one except Reby. And she loved it. Amy stopped speaking much. Her laughter, once warm and frequent, became rare. But Reby kept going. She would say things like, "You're so good at traditions, Amy. Some of them are a little outdated, but still valuable. I hope I'm as strong as you when I'm older if my knees don't give out like yours. You've done so much for this home. Now you should rest, even if things get a little messy without you." Each sentence sugar-coated. Each one a silent slap. And Hamza? He heard only the sweetness. He never heard the venom. One night, after dinner, Amy accidentally spilled some water on the floor. She bent down to wipe it, but Reby rushed over. No, Amy, please don't bend. Your back isn't like before, she said, taking the cloth from her hand. Then, turning to Hamza, she added playfully, "She's so stubborn. Doesn't believe she's aged a day." Hamza chuckled. Amy stood up slowly. She didn't argue, didn't defend, because she knew, the moment she responded, she'd be painted as sensitive, dramatic, or worse, disrespectful. So she swallowed it, like she had swallowed every smile dipped in mockery, every compliment hiding a curse, every word of venom served in a voice of sugar. The house once held laughter, real, loud, effortless laughter. It echoed in the hallways. It blended with the sound of clinking teacups and late-night board games. It lived in the corners, in the walls Amy painted, in the couch she stitched, in the meals she cooked with love and spice. But now, the silence was louder. The smiles were shorter. The dinners were quieter. And the air? It felt heavier, as if grief had moved in, quietly unpacked, and taken over the living room. Amy felt it first, deep in her chest, the hollowness. Hamza still lived under the same roof, still greeted her when he came home, still asked, "Amy, apathy Kane?" from a distance. But the warmth was gone. He no longer sat with her after dinner. He didn't tell her about work or laugh about things like he used to. He barely noticed when she started eating alone. And she noticed everything. She noticed when he started referring to Reby's room instead of our room. She noticed when he stopped asking, "Amy, what do you want from the market?" and instead asked Reby privately. She noticed when the light in his eyes dimmed, not from anger or sadness, but from absence. And Reba? She noticed too. Not as a daughter-in-law, but as a strategist. She had begun sealing Amy off from the heart of the home. Literally. She took over the kitchen entirely. You've done enough your whole life, Amy. Let me manage now. She moved Amy's medicine cabinet to the guest room, gently saying, You need more peace, Amy. Your room is right beside the TV. She started serving dinner late, after making sure Amy had already eaten alone in her room. All done with soft words, sugar smiles, and an iron will. Cousins stopped visiting. The warmth that once welcomed them was gone. The house no longer smelled of kheer or fresh roti. The corners felt cold. The vibe, tense. Reba never said, Don't come. But she made sure they never felt welcome. If guests arrived, she'd sigh softly. Oh, if only I'd known. I would have made something nicer. Or she'd whisper to Hamza, just loud enough, I wish Amy would ask before inviting people. I like to plan better. Soon, even families started choosing to call instead of visit. And the house, once full of life, became a shell. Amy's isolation wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. Reba had positioned herself at the center of every conversation, every decision, every routine. If Hamza was on the phone, she was by his side. If he made a plan, she filtered it. And Amy? She sat more and spoke less. One day, she walked into the kitchen and noticed her old spice rack missing. She stood still, blinking. Reba walked in behind her and said with a cheerful tone, Oh, I moved some things around.
Just to make it easier for me.
Hope you don't mind. Your system was a bit outdated. Amy nodded. Inside, something cracked. Not just the spice jars. Her connection to her home. The breaking point came during Eid. Traditionally, Amy had always prepared the first meal. Her hands mixed the batter for pakoras, her voice guided the kitchen like a conductor, and her warmth made the day feel whole. But this time, she woke up to the sound of sizzling oil. Reba had already taken over. The table was set, the food cooked, the house cleaned, and no one had asked Amy, not even once, to help. Hamza walked in, kissed Reba's forehead, and said, You're amazing. This looks perfect. Amy stood in the corner, holding her prayer beads. Not one person noticed she hadn't eaten. That night, she sat on her bed and looked around her room. Her room, not her house anymore. Everything felt borrowed, the air, the silence, even her existence. She picked up a photo frame from her side table. It was a picture of her, Hamza, and his younger sister, taken on a trip years ago. They were laughing, arms around each other, wind in their hair. She stared at it for a long time. And then she whispered, to no one in particular, This house isn't mine anymore, not even my son is. Meanwhile, Hamza was drowning, and didn't even know it. He felt disconnected, unsure, emotionally drained. But he couldn't point out what was wrong. He thought it was work stress. Maybe the pressure of marriage. Maybe just life. He didn't realize the foundation of his world, the bond between a mother and son, had been quietly and systematically dismantled. And Reba? She sat beside him, holding his hand, whispering sweet reassurances like, Maybe Amy just needs space. You're doing your best, Hamza. Don't feel guilty. Some mothers find it hard to let go. And brick by brick, she kept pulling down the house they once called a home. Reba had a gift, not for truth, not for love, but for performance. She could cry on cue. Her voice could tremble just the right way. Her eyes could well up with just enough tears to make any heart soften. And when those tears flowed, she didn't need facts. Just feelings. Feelings she manipulated perfectly. The first time it happened, Hamza's cousin Sarah had come over. Sarah was close to Amy. She'd practically grown up in the house. She noticed things. The dimness in Amy's eyes. The hesitation in her voice. The way she sat in the corner, like she didn't belong. Sarah stayed quiet for a while. But when Reba made yet another sly comment in front of everyone, some people just don't know how to adjust, even after so many years. Sarah couldn't stay silent. She smiled tightly and replied, Respect goes both ways, Reba. Adjustment does too. Reba went pale for a second. And then the performance began. Her voice cracked. I try so hard, Sarah. I cook, I clean, I take care of Amy like my own. But no matter what I do, I'm always the one at fault. Always the outsider. She stood up suddenly, holding back sobs. Maybe I'm not good enough for this family. Hamza froze. Sarah opened her mouth, but Hamza shot her a look. He followed Reby to the bedroom. No one saw what happened there, but when they came out, Reby's eyes were red and puffy, and Hamza looked furious. Not at her, at Sarah, at Amy. After that, things changed even more. Reby mastered the art of emotional warfare, using tears as weapons and sympathy as armor. Every time someone noticed Amy was eating alone, Reby cried, I just wanted to give her space. Am I supposed to force her to love me? Every time a family member hinted at her being controlling, she whispered to Hamza, they don't know how much I struggle behind closed doors. How your mother speaks to me when no one's watching. And every time Amy tried to raise her voice, just once, Reby turned it around like a magician flipping a card. I just asked if she wanted tea, and she scolded me in front of everyone. I felt so small. Hamza began defending Reby more than ever. He didn't even realize how far he drifted from his mother. Once, when Amy mustered the courage to say, Hamza, why don't we sit and talk like before? Alone like we used to, Reby overheard it. That evening, she didn't speak a word during dinner. She just placed food on the table silently, eyes moist, lips trembling. And when Hamza asked, Are you okay? She replied in a quiet whisper, No one likes being excluded. I just want to be part of your life. And that was it. Amy's small request for 5 minutes with her son became another reason for Reby to win his heart a little more. She made sure no one could question her without becoming the villain. If anyone criticized her food, she cried, I spend hours making it. Why is it never enough? If Amy tried to correct her, even gently, she walked out of the room and locked herself in. And Hamza? He followed. Every time. At one point, Amy tried to tell her brother, Cha-Cha John, what was going on. He visited for tea. He noticed her growing silence. She finally spoke. I think Reby is changing things too much. She's not what she pretends to be. He frowned. What do you mean? Before she could answer, Reby entered with tea. Reby smiled at Cha-Cha John and placed the tray gently, her hands slightly trembling. Sorry if the tea is too strong. Amy said it's not up to her standard. Cha-Cha looked confused. Amy opened her mouth, shocked. I didn't say that. Reby looked down, lips quivering. Maybe I misunderstood. I've been trying hard to learn how she likes it. She sniffed softly. I just feel like I keep disappointing her. Amy looked at her brother. She saw doubt in his eyes. Reby had done it again. She turned everything she did, every insult, every manipulation, into a misunderstood act of love. And people believed her. Because she didn't scream. She didn't fight. She wept. She acted heartbroken, exhausted, too emotional to be lying. And Amy? She grew quieter. She stopped speaking up. Because every time she tried, she became the attacker, and Reby, the victim. The tragedy wasn't just in what Reby did. It was in how masterfully she made everyone else feel guilty for seeing the truth. She blurred the lines. Was she really evil, or just misunderstood? Was Amy really hurt, or just too rigid? She poisoned minds without a single drop, just words, glances, and tears. And in that house, where truth once had a voice, now only the sobs of a skilled actress echoed. And every time she cried, she won. No matter how perfect the performance, even the best mask slip, if not from the actor, then through the whispers of fate. Reby had spent years curating her image, the ideal wife, the misunderstood daughter-in-law, the fragile soul burdened by a cold, unaccepting mother-in-law. And everyone believed her. Except time. Time doesn't lie. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Hamza was at work. Amy was in her room, quietly sewing old clothes to give away before Eid. The house was unusually silent, and Reba, thinking she was alone, was on the phone. Her voice, no longer honeyed, was sharp and confident. "I've got him wrapped around my little finger," she laughed. "Every time his mother blinks, he thinks she's scolding me. Can you believe it?" A pause. Then more laughter. "She actually asked for a few minutes alone with him last week. I made sure she didn't get them." Played the sad wife card. Tears, silence, the usual. On the other end of the line, her friend laughed along. "She's such a drama queen. And the best part? Everyone thinks I'm the victim." Hamza even told Cha-Cha John that his mother might need counseling. They both laughed loudly. But what Reba didn't know was that the living room Bluetooth speaker had auto-connected to her phone. Amy had accidentally turned it on earlier while dusting, and now every word Reba said echoed through the living room.
Loud. Clear.
Undeniable. Amy stood frozen in the hallway, hand over her chest. She wasn't just hearing Reba's cruelty, she was hearing the proof. The proof she'd never been able to show. The voice her son trusted blindly was now exposing itself, line by vicious line. Amy didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat down and listened. By the time Reba came out of the room, still giggling, the speaker was off. Amy was gone from the hallway. Everything looked normal. Too normal. But the universe wasn't done revealing truths just yet. That evening, Hamza came home tired, rubbing his temples. Reba, as always, greeted him sweetly and handed him tea. But before he could sip it, his phone buzzed. It was a voice note from his younger cousin Nita. He played it casually, but the moment he heard it, he stopped breathing. "Bye, I wasn't sure if I should send this, but I overheard Reba talking to someone in the cafe last week. I didn't want to believe it, so I stayed quiet. But today I saw her again at the same spot, and this time, she was mocking Amy and you both. I recorded a part of it. Please just listen. Then decide for yourself." His hand trembled as he hit play. It was Reba's voice.
Clear.
Cold. Calculating. "Hamza is a fool. I cry twice, and he starts fighting with his mother for me. She could be dying and he'd still ask me if I'm okay first." He didn't finish the recording. He just stared at his wife. For the first time, really saw her. Not the victim. Not the gentle soul. But the woman behind the mask. "Reba," his voice cracked. "What is this?" She blinked. Then smiled faintly. "What is what, John?" He held up the phone, pressed play again. This time, her words filled the air of their bedroom. Her smirk slowly vanished. She snatched the phone. "Who sent this? They must have edited it. This is fake. Someone's jealous." He stepped back. "Enough." His voice wasn't loud. It was broken. "I stood against my mother for you. I doubted her. I believed you. Every time. And this is what you were doing behind my back." Still, she tried to perform. Tears appeared, but they were no longer convincing.
"You don't understand."
"It was just talk, I didn't mean." Hamza's hands clenched. "And the speaker in the lounge today?" he asked quietly. "That was just talk too?" Her face turned pale. The final thread of her web had snapped. Downstairs, Amy was quietly praying. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't even ask for revenge. She just wanted the truth to come out. And fate had delivered. That night, the house was quiet. But it was a different kind of silence. Not the one filled with lies and manipulation, but the stillness that comes after a storm. When the sky begins to clear. The masks were gone. And finally, the truth stood unshaken in the middle of their home. Here is the final part of your story. Part 10. Regret, but it's too late. 900 words of emotional closure and truth. Part 10. Regret, but it's too late. The next morning, the house didn't feel like home. It was the same paint, the same furniture, the same curtains fluttering in the July breeze. But something was missing. Or rather, someone. Hamza woke up with a hollow chest. Reba was silent. No tea. No soft voice. Only a deafening quiet that echoed the weight of the night before. Downstairs, he didn't find his mother at the breakfast table. No gentle hands folding his napkin. No soft beta, nashta thanda horaha hai. Just a note. Handwritten. Neatly folded. Placed beside an untouched cup of tea. Hamza. I never wanted to come between your peace. I stayed silent, thinking my silence was strength. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. But I cannot live in a house where my presence feels like poison. I am not leaving with anger. I am leaving with love. Because mothers leave not to punish, but to save whatever is left. May Allah protect you from every lie. And may you never again trust someone so blindly that you forget who held your hand before you could even speak.
Amy.
The words cut deeper than any knife. Hamza dropped into the chair, eyes fixed on the note, throat burning. He called her. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. He rushed to her room. Empty closet. Folded bed. Pillow perfectly placed. It wasn't a dramatic exit. There were no slammed doors or shouting matches. Just silence. A silence soaked in heartbreak. He turned to Reby. She stood by the staircase, arms folded, lips tight. She left, she asked flatly. He looked at her, truly looked, but there was no trace of sorrow in her eyes. Only nervousness. Guilt, maybe, but not pain. Because of you, he whispered. Reby looked away. She always wanted to leave. She never liked me. Stop.
His voice had strength now.
Not loud, but sharp, unshakable. I stood by you when you lied, when you cried, when you made her look like the villain. And I believed you because I loved you. But I forgot the one woman who spent her whole life loving me without conditions. Tears finally filled her eyes. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. He cut her off. You meant every word, every act, every game. For the first time, she didn't defend herself, because there was nothing left to defend. She turned and walked upstairs. And Hamza sat alone, staring at the note again. Hours passed. He tried to call his mother again. Still no answer. He drove to her sister's house. No one had seen her.
Checked the mosque.
The market. The clinic. No trace. It was as if the woman who once filled his home with warmth had vanished, and in her place, he was left with empty walls and a heart full of regret. Days turned into weeks. People began to talk. Whispers spread, not about Amy, but about Reby. The cousin's recording made its way into the family circle. The Bluetooth speaker incident was shared in hushed voices. And slowly, the truth burned through every lie Reby had built. Hamza came home one evening, exhausted from searching. The lights were dim. The air felt heavy. He found Reby in the lounge, suitcase open. She looked at him with tired eyes. I'm leaving, she said. He didn't reply. I know you hate me. Still, silence. She zipped the suitcase. But I did love you once. I just hated sharing you. She walked toward the door, then turned back. If you ever find her, tell her I'm sorry. Even if she never forgives me. She left. Not in shame. Not in defiance. Just quietly. The same way she had destroyed everything, silently, layer by layer. Now the house truly echoed. Not with voices. Not with arguments. But with memories. Of a mother's touch. A son's blind love. A daughter-in-law's betrayal. And one man sitting in the ruins of the life he thought was perfect. Weeks later, Hamza received a letter. It had no address, no signature, but he knew the handwriting. His mother. Beta. I am safe. Don't worry. I am with people who treat me like I still matter. I still pray for you every morning. And I still love you more than words can ever say. But for now, I need to be far enough to breathe again. Maybe one day, when your home is filled with truth and peace, I will return. Until then, remember me not with guilt, but with the same love you once had as a child.
Amy.
Hamza held the letter to his heart. Tears flowed freely. He didn't know where she was. He didn't know if she'd ever come back. But he knew one thing. He had lost something irreplaceable, not because he was cruel, but because he had trusted cruelty wearing the face of love. And now it was too late.